So to start the layout, I want to draw a center line. So that means, let's see, I've got a 12-inch blank here. So I'm going to put my center line at 6 inches. And I'm going to transfer that center line around all 4 sides. Okay. Now I want to pick which side I want for the sole, where I want the blade. So I'm just really going to do this by appearance. This side looks better for a top surface to me, so we're going to put the blade on this side. And then we need to pick which side the escapement's going to be on. And I'm going to pick this side for the escapement. So the blade's going to sit on the bottom this way. Okay, the sole's going to be up in the front here. That's where we'll put a little brass strip. This part back here will be the escapement. So at the escapement section, I want to lay out a 3/16 inch area for where the back edge of the blade is going to sit. Okay, so that's the amount of material that's going to sit behind the blade to support it. Is that 3/16 of an inch. Now your blade may be different. It really depends on which blade you chose. Okay, so that's pretty good right there. Now I want to reset my gauge so that it's centered on the screw holes. So I'm gonna make a little mark right here. I'm gonna make a little mark there. So that's sort of where the center of each one of those screw holes is, because again, my blade is homemade, so it may be a little bit off. So that's the center line, right? That's where the screw holes are going to be. Now I need to go out from the center line about 1 23/32 of an inch to either side. So that's because my screw holes are 3 7/16 apart on center. So I'm going to go 1 27/32, 23/32. So I'm going to sort of estimate that. So that's 1 inch, 16/32, 18, 20, 22, 23/32 is right about there. But more importantly is I want that center to center mark to be right, and that I know is 3 7/16. So 1, 2, 3, 7/16. So I'll put a mark there. Okay, and I'm going to double check that with the blade just to make sure. I'm going to look through the holes of the blade. Yep, that lines up. Now your screws may not be removable from your blade, so you may have to improvise a little bit. And then I'm just going to transfer that mark where the center of the hole was over here. Okay, so we've got 2 points there. That's where our screw holes are going to be. So I'm going to dimple those with an awl. I need to put a hole there. I need to put a hole there. Okay, now I'm going to do this on the drill press because I want these holes to be as straight as possible. So if you don't have a drill press, you can do it with a bracing bit or a hand drill. Just make sure you get these holes as straight as possible. So I'm going to go drill those holes to be the correct size for these screws, and then I'll come back after I have those holes bored. All right, so as I said, I bored these holes on the drill press. You can see the blade, these will be fixed in this way. And you notice I have 2 other smaller holes drilled there. And this is a feature I talked about in the blog post that's going to allow a little bit of ease of adjustability of the Spokeshave. If you're using the Veritas blade, you won't need to drill those holes unnecessary. You can use this type of adjustability if you're getting the hock blade. And there's other ways to do this as well. So all this really is it's a hole that's tapped with a regular old size 10 24 thread per inch machine screw tap. And what we're going to do with that is we're going to put in one of these little 1024 set screws. And that's going to allow us to adjust with a little Allen key from the top that screw. And by making that screw project on the bottom here, when the blade is set into its little mortise, you'll see those screws will be underneath the blade. So that actually will allow you to adjust a little bit of fine tuning of the projection. If you don't have a tap that you can use to put these holes in, you can do the same thing with just a wood screw. If you get a small wood screw, bore a pilot hole and a counter bore for the head of that wood screw, then you can adjust the wood screw with just with a screwdriver in or out to help you with the depth adjustment of your blade. The main difference is with the wood screw setup, you actually have to remove the blade, make the adjustment with the screwdriver, and then put the blade back. With these little set screws, the holes are bored all the way through, so you can just drop a little Allen key in through the top, and you can make that depth adjustment. And again, like I said, it's just a 1024 machine screw thread, which is why I mentioned you want a wood that's dense enough and hard enough that it'll accept threads and hold them relatively strongly. So once you get it started, you just want to make sure it's square, and you can just tap this all the way through, and then you've got some nice threads in there that you can use for those set screws. And if it bottoms out and doesn't go all the way through, not a big deal, because you actually only need the bottom portion threaded. So where it comes through at the top really doesn't need to be threaded. It's really just the bottom that needs threading, because you want the set screw to be able to protrude from the bottom to adjust your blade depth. So just a neat little feature that I saw on some other commercially made shaves, and in an article that I saw in one of the magazines a few years ago. I thought it was a neat little feature. So all right, let's finish up with the layout now. We've got those screws done, right? So now we've got a layout for the actual escapement. So my escapement is right there. There's the size of the escapement that I need. It's the size of the blade. So if I just get these holes set, I just mark myself right off the blade. And I don't even really need to measure this. And then we're going to square that up to the back. Okay, once we have that, now the front of the blade, we want to mark that as well. I'm going to do this with a gauge because I do want to cut in later, but I'm just going to make a temporary mark with a pencil just so you can sort of see what I have here. Okay, so I have this blade, the front of the blade is marked there. Okay, now along the escapement or back side, I want to come down about 1/4 of an inch from the top. And this is because we're going to do a little bit of shaping later to relieve that. So if you picture, the blade's going to sit in here, okay? This is the top surface here. Okay, this is going to be the top. So we want to come down about 1/4 of an inch from the top. We're going to mark that. Okay, let's mark that so you can see it. All right, now we're going to transfer our escapement there. And there. Okay, so first things first, we want to saw this material out. So it's sort of like sawing out a half-blind dovetail, okay? We're going to saw on an angle down those two side lines until we hit this line here and this line in the back. Okay, so let's saw those out now. All right, now with those marks chopped there, those two saw cuts, I'm going to go ahead and chop that material out. Between those, we want to chop it at an angle. But being across the grain, it should split out fairly easily. And just like you're cutting a dovetail or any other type of joinery, chop down until you connect those two lines. And then pare it smooth, and that's going to form the escapement for the shave. Okay, and don't worry about if this isn't perfect right now. Get close, but it doesn't have to be perfect just yet, because we're going to end up having to probably make a few minor adjustments a little bit later when we're tuning the shave up, just to make sure we're not getting any clogging or anything in here. So the next thing you want to do is take your blade, and you want to fix your blade in place so that you can mark out where we have to relieve or mortise down so that the blade can set down in the shave, right? So what I want to do is I'm going to take my screws, I'm just going to put them in there. And again, depending on the type of blade that you have, yours is going to work a little bit differently. So I'm just going to set those in there, and it looks like I have to make a little minor adjustment because that's a little bit tight. That's okay. So now you can see how this will tighten up to there. See how this is going to fix in shape with those knurled nuts there. One doesn't want to go, all right? I'll get that later. At any rate, what I want to do now is trace around this with my pencil or a knife if you want. And I want to mark the location of the tangs here, the sides, because we have to relieve, chop little mortises in there until that blade sits down flush or just barely below the surface. Okay, so if I take this out now, a little tight. I have to adjust those screw holes just a little bit. You can do that with a chainsaw file or a little rat tail file, little rat tail needle file if you have one. Just get that out of there. Okay, but now you see there's some, we have to cut that part out. So I'm going to take a chisel and I'm going to chop that out just to this 1/8 inch depth. Okay, my blade is about 1/8 of an inch thick. So I'm going to go down just about 1/8 of an inch, maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more, just so that blade will seat down in there. So let's do that now. All right, so these mortises, again, are just about the depth or a little bit more than the thickness of your blade. A little bit more is okay because you want to be able to, if you're going to use the set screw method or the wood screw method to adjust the depth of your blade, you want the blade to be able to sink a little bit below or just very right on, perfectly flush, so that you can sit it below or basically get it out of the cut. We're going to adjust it later. So that's not bad. That sits pretty much flush. Now you may look inside your escapement and look for light. What you may find as you sink the mortises for the sides of the blade, the bevel of the blade may contact, it may actually contact the escapement here. So if it does, what you can do is just take a wide chisel and sort of pare that away. You can even undercut it a little bit so it's sort of a concave shape. Sort of scoop it out. It doesn't have to be a straight line. In fact, it may even look kind of neat if it sort of has a concave profile to the escapement. It's really not that important because it's going to be inside under the blade. But you just want to make sure that when you seat the blade, that when you sight through, that you can see a little bit of light. And this looks pretty good, except maybe for this side over here I might have to take a little bit of material away, but we'll work on that a little bit later because we still have to bevel off this front edge. But at this point you can actually take the shave and start to assemble it, start to put it together, and it should actually look like something resembling a Spokeshave without any of the extra shaping going on. Okay, now it's not going to cut yet because we haven't created the sole. If you look in the plans, that's that 8-degree angle that's on the front of this. So this won't cut this way. We need to relieve this to give the blade edge some exposure. So now that we have this mortise and the escapement done, now we're going to go ahead and bevel the front edge of this off. So what I've done is lay out the sole. Essentially we've got a line that's about 1/4 of an inch in from the front edge. That's right where the blade meets. And then there's a line on the front side that's about 1/16 of an inch up. This is not vital that this is exactly 8 degrees. Somewhere between 5 and 10 is usually sufficient. 5 might be getting a little bit on the low side. 10's probably good. 8, 7, somewhere around there. Essentially, it's just like a hand plane. When you use a hand plane, there's a clearance angle behind that bevel. You need to create that clearance angle in order for this to cut. So that's what we're going to do. And I'm using just a number 4 size plane for no other reason than it's what I had available that's sharp. But use whatever you want. Rip it on a table saw. Use a wooden plane or a joiner or whatever, a block plane. You just want to sneak up on this and plane a nice flat bevel from one end to the other. And you notice I'm doing this before I shape the handles, and that's to give me more registration for planing the bevel. I don't want just a little short section here. If you look at a lot of Spokeshaves, you know, the sole is only about that wide, and that really isn't a whole lot of registration for a plane. So if you plane this angle before you shape the shave, before you shape the handles, it gives you a lot more registration for the plane and allows you to plane that sole more true. So I'm just going to plane this down, and it shouldn't take much. Taking kind of a fine cut here, but I'm trying to sneak up on both lines at the same time. Again, it's only about 1/16 of an inch deep, so you don't need to remove a whole lot of material. So just keep planing until you sneak up on that cut. Okay, that looks pretty good. We can always fine tune this later. Just see there's a nice bevel about 8 degrees. So now we can actually refit the iron, and we may, depending on how everything fits up, we may actually even be able to give this a try now and see if it cuts. So I've done a little bit more fitting. I adjusted the escapement area here a little bit more. I also widened those screw holes out just a little bit so everything fits good. And we've got good solid bedding there. Now you'll notice that there's no exposure here at all. So this blade's not going to cut yet. We do have a nice sole, but there's no mouth. So we may have to open that up a little bit. But before we do, I want to give it a try. So I'm going to take those set screws that I told you about earlier, and I'm going to put those in so that they can be adjusted from the top. Because we tapped these holes, so we should be able to, you might have to go in from the bottom. I don't remember if I was able to tap them all the way through. There we go. So we'll back this one up through, and you'll see what I mean by putting these screws in here. Okay, that little set screw gives me some height adjustment because it's going to push the blade out. I can retract it so that the screw is all the way in. It's a little tight because I don't think it tapped all the way through, so I may have to run the tap up through there again. But you can see there's the head of that little set screw. And as I mentioned before, you can just use a wood screw as well. You just have to countersink for the head of the wood screw. But the beauty of these is that I can adjust the depth from the top rather than having to remove the blade. So that one's flush. Let's put the other one in. And I'll probably have to run the tap back through these after I finish shaping. After I remove some of the wood, I'll run the tap back through to give them a little bit more thread. That one went through a lot better. So there, that one's down. So now I can put the blade in. And put my little knurled nuts on there. And these screw holes on the top are positioned for those set screws so that you can just squeak the hex wrench, the hex key, Allen key, in next to them, so you can make that adjustment from the top. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn that set screw out, and it's going to push the blade just a little bit. So now I can feel I've got a little exposure there. I'm actually going to back it off a little bit. And tighten this one up here so it pulls it back. And we're going to adjust the exposure on this side, push it out just a little bit. There, I made contact with the blade. Got a little bit of exposure. Let's give this a try and see what happens. Now I'm rocking forward, so with these shaves, because that sole, the way that sole is, you need to rock forward in order to use them. Nice. Let's give the blade a little bit more projection. Beautiful. Doesn't clog up, shavings are ejected, leaves a nice smooth surface. So from here, now you can use this shave as is. This section here in front of the blade is going to wear down pretty quickly if you leave it like this. So what I'm going to do is inlay a piece of brass here, and that's what we're going to start with the next time.